If you are getting close to age 65, this is one of those moments where a small mistake can turn into a very expensive problem. I am not talking about some hidden trick or internet rumor. I am talking about Medicare timing rules, late penalties, HSA issues, and coverage gaps that are clearly explained by Medicare, Social Security, and the IRS. And if you miss one of those rules, the cost is not always a one-time hit. In some cases, it can follow you for years. I'm Norix Hale, and you're watching Federal Benefits Guide. In this video, we are going to break down what really happens when you turn 65, where people lose money, what the official government sources actually say, and most importantly, how to fix it before it becomes a long-term problem. And just to keep this clean and accurate from the start, this is not a breaking news story in the usual sense. This is a public interest update based on current official U.S. government guidance, because a lot of people turning 65 are still making the same costly mistakes. So if you or someone in your family is getting close to Medicare age, stay with me, because this is one of those topics where a little clarity can save a lot of money. The basic issue is simple. A lot of people think turning 65 means Medicare automatically works itself out. Sometimes it does, but very often it doesn't. Some people are automatically enrolled in certain parts of Medicare. Others are not. Some people can delay enrollment without a penalty. Others absolutely cannot. Some people keep working and assume their employer plan is enough. In some cases, that is true. In other cases, that assumption can cost real money. And some people keep contributing to a health savings account without realizing Medicare enrollment changes the tax rules. That is where the losing thousands part comes in. Not because everyone turning 65 will lose money, but because if you make the wrong move on enrollment timing, drug coverage, or HSA contributions, the extra costs can pile up month after month, year after year. So let's start with the most important part. What actually happens when you turn 65? According to Medicare.gov, most people first become eligible to sign up for Medicare during what is called the Initial Enrollment Period. That window starts 3 months before the month you turn 65, includes your birth month, and continues for 3 months after that month. In plain English, that gives most people a 7-month sign-up window. Medicare.gov. That 7-month period is where a lot of the important decisions happen. Do you sign up for Part A? Do you sign up for Part B? Do you need drug coverage? Can you delay anything because you are still working? And if you delay, are you delaying correctly, or are you walking into a penalty without knowing it? That is the real issue. Now let's talk about the part people usually hear first, the penalty problem. Medicare's official guidance says late enrollment penalties are generally added to your monthly premium, and they are usually not one-time fees. That matters a lot, because many people hear the word penalty and assume it means one charge, one bill, done. But Medicare says that for most people, these penalties are ongoing and can last as long as you have that coverage. Medicare.gov. That is exactly why this topic is so important. Let's break that into real-world terms. For Part B, which helps cover doctor visits, outpatient care, and other medical services, Medicare says the penalty is generally an extra 10% for each full 12-month period. You could have had Part B, but did not sign up for it if you did not qualify for a special enrollment period. Medicare.gov. That means if you delayed 2 full years without a valid reason, the penalty would generally be 20% on top of the standard premium. And Medicare's own example for 2026 shows how this adds up. The standard Part B premium listed in that example is $202.90 per month. A 20% penalty adds $40.58, bringing the total to about $243.50 per month. Medicare.gov. Now think about that over time. That is not just one expensive month. That is month after month, year after year. And that is exactly how people end up losing thousands of dollars over the long run. Then there is Part D, which covers prescription drugs. Medicare says if you do not join a Medicare drug plan when you are first eligible, and then go 63 days or more without creditable drug coverage, you may have to pay a late enrollment penalty there too. Medicare.gov. The official rule says the Part D penalty is generally 1% for each month you went without creditable coverage. So that is not just a technical rule for paperwork. It is another ongoing cost that can follow you into the future. And again, Medicare's own 2026 example shows how they calculate it using the national base beneficiary premium of $38.99. Medicare.gov. Now, to be fair and accurate, not everybody who delays Medicare gets penalized. This is where a lot of confusion begins. Because people hear, sign up at 65 or you'll be punished, and that is too simplistic. The official guidance is more specific than that. If you or your spouse are still working and you have qualifying employer group health coverage, Medicare says you may be able to delay Part B without paying a late enrollment penalty. Medicare.gov. That is a very important point. You may not need to rush into Part B the moment you turn 65 if you are still covered properly through active employment. But here is the dangerous part. A lot of people hear that rule, then assume it applies to every type of coverage. It does not. The details matter. And this is where thousands of dollars can be lost simply because people think all insurance after 65 works the same way. It doesn't. Medicare specifically says that if you have employer group health insurance available to everyone at the company, you can often wait until you or your spouse stop working or lose that coverage to sign up for Part B without a penalty. Medicare.gov. After that happens, the government gives you a special enrollment period, often called an SEP. According to Medicare and Social Security, that window is generally 8 months for Part B after the employment or employer coverage ends, whichever happens first. Medicare.gov, SSA.gov. That 8-month rule is a big deal, because once that window closes, many people have to wait for a different enrollment period and may face penalties. Now let's get to one of the most common and costly mistakes, COBRA confusion. This is a major trap. A lot of people leave a job after 65, take COBRA, and think they are safe to delay Medicare because they still have health coverage. But Medicare's official guidance is very clear here. COBRA is not treated the same as active employer coverage for this purpose. Medicare says your 8-month special enrollment period starts when you stop working, even if you choose COBRA or another non-Medicare coverage option. Medicare.gov. That means COBRA does not extend your Medicare timing window. And Medicare also says very directly, don't wait until your COBRA coverage ends to sign up for Part B. Medicare.gov. This is one of those rules that can save people a serious amount of money. Because if someone leaves a job, keeps COBRA, and assumes they can sign up for Medicare later when COBRA ends, they may miss their proper enrollment period and face both a gap in coverage and a Part B late penalty. That is not a small administrative issue. That can become a real financial problem. The same thing can happen with retiree coverage. Many people think retiree coverage from a former employer automatically protects them the same way active work coverage does. But Medicare warns that retiree coverage may not pay for services if you do not have both Medicare Part A and Part B, depending on how that plan works. Medicare.gov. So again, the official message is the same. Do not assume. Check the rules before making the decision. Another area people miss is drug coverage. Someone might think, I don't take many prescriptions, so I'll just deal with that later. But Medicare doesn't judge this based on whether you personally use many medications right now. The key question is whether you have creditable drug coverage, meaning coverage that is expected to pay at least as much as Medicare's standard prescription drug coverage. Medicare.gov. If you go more than 63 days without that kind of coverage after becoming eligible, Medicare says a Part D penalty may apply. Medicare.gov. That is why official notices about whether coverage is creditable matter so much. This is not one of those letters to throw away. It could affect whether you owe a penalty later. Now let's move to another hidden money issue that surprises a lot of people, the HSA problem. If you have a health savings account and you are nearing 65, this is where tax rules can get tricky very fast. The IRS says that once you are enrolled in Medicare, your HSA contribution limit becomes zero, starting with the first month of Medicare enrollment. IRS.gov. That alone is important. But there is another part that catches people off guard. According to Medicare.gov, if you have an HSA, you and your employer should stop contributing to it 6 months before you retire or apply for Social Security benefits to help avoid a tax penalty. Medicare.gov. Why? Because Medicare also says that if you sign up for premium-free Part A later, your Part A coverage can begin up to 6 months retroactively, but not earlier than the month you turned 65. Medicare.gov. And the IRS says the zero contribution rule applies even to periods of retroactive Medicare coverage. So if someone keeps putting money into an HSA, then later enrolls in Medicare and gets retroactive Part A coverage, those contributions during the retroactive months may be treated as excess contributions. IRS.gov. That is one of the clearest examples of how a person can lose money without ever meaning to do anything wrong. They were saving. They were following the habit they already had. But because of the interaction between Medicare start dates and IRS HSA rules, that normal contribution pattern can create a tax issue. And if you are age 55 or older, yes, the IRS does allow an additional $1,000 catch-up contribution to an HSA for eligible individuals. But again, eligibility matters. The catch-up amount exists only if you are still HSA eligible. Once Medicare enrollment begins, that changes the picture. IRS.gov. So let's pause here and make this very practical. Where are the biggest money loss points for someone turning 65? Number 1. Missing the initial enrollment period without realizing it. Number 2. Assuming work coverage always means you can delay, without checking whether it actually qualifies. Number 3. Thinking COBRA protects your Medicare timing. It usually does not. Number 4. Going without creditable drug coverage for too long. And number 5. Continuing HSA contributions too close to Medicare enrollment or Social Security filing. Those are the big 5. Now let's talk about sources. Because one of the biggest problems in this area is that people often rely on oversimplified social media advice, sales pitches, or half-correct summaries. For this script, the strongest sources are official U.S. government sources. Medicare.gov explains the enrollment windows, penalties, COBRA warning, coverage start dates, and working past 65 rules. Medicare.gov. The Social Security Administration explains how to sign up for Part B and confirms that people ending employer group coverage may be able to enroll during a special enrollment period without a penalty. SSA.gov and the IRS, through Publication 969, explains the HSA rules, including the zero contribution limit once Medicare enrollment begins and the risk around retroactive coverage. IRS.gov. That is important because this is not guesswork. This is not based on someone on a forum said. This is based on the agencies that actually administer the rules. Now let's move into background, because understanding the chain of events makes all of this easier. For years, many Americans reached age 65 and signed up for Medicare in a more straightforward way, often because they were retiring around that time. But retirement patterns have changed. More people work longer. More people phase into retirement. More people use employer plans beyond 65. More people have HSAs. And more people move between active work coverage, COBRA, retiree plans, marketplace plans, or private coverage. That changing reality is one reason this topic has become more confusing. The age milestone is still 65 for many Medicare decisions. But the path people take around that age is no longer simple. That means the risk is no longer just, did you sign up or not? The real risk is, did you sign up for the right thing, at the right time, based on your actual coverage situation? That is a much more specific question. And it is the reason two neighbors who are both turning 65 can have completely different correct answers. One person may need to enroll right away. Another may safely delay Part B. Another may need to stop HSA contributions months in advance. Another may need to check whether their drug coverage is creditable. So if the headline says, "Turning 65, you could be losing thousands," the accurate framing is this: you are not automatically losing thousands just because you turned 65. But if you misunderstand the enrollment rules around age 65, the financial consequences can become large and long-lasting. That is the honest version. Now let's talk about direct confirmed impact versus possible impact. The direct confirmed impact is clear. If you miss a required enrollment period and do not qualify for an exception, Medicare says you may owe a monthly late enrollment penalty for Part B, Part D, or in some cases, Premium Part A. Medicare.gov. If you rely on COBRA and assume it protects your Part B timing, Medicare says that can still lead to missed deadlines because COBRA does not extend that special enrollment period. Medicare.gov. If you keep contributing to an HSA after Medicare enrollment starts, the IRS says those contributions can be excess contributions. IRS.gov. Those are confirmed rule-based impacts. The possible impact depends on the person. One person may only lose a little. Another may pay more every month for years. Someone else may face a temporary coverage gap that creates unexpected medical bills. Someone with expensive prescriptions could be affected more heavily by poor drug coverage timing. And someone contributing aggressively to an HSA could have a more noticeable tax problem if they do not stop contributions in time. So the dollar amount is not identical for everybody, but the risk is real, and the pathway to that risk is clearly documented. Now let's answer the question people really want answered. What is the fix? The fix starts with this: do not treat age 65 as a generic birthday event. Treat it as a Medicare decision point. At least several months before that birthday month, figure out which category you are actually in. Are you already receiving Social Security benefits? Are you still working? Is your spouse still working? Is your insurance from active employment, COBRA, retiree coverage, marketplace coverage, or something else? Do you have an HSA? And do you have creditable prescription drug coverage? Those questions matter more than a random checklist from the internet. Second, know your window. For most people, Medicare says the first major sign-up window is the 7-month initial enrollment period around age 65. Medicare.gov. If you can safely delay because of qualifying employer coverage, then track the special enrollment period carefully. Do not guess. Do not assume COBRA buys you extra time. And do not let the 8-month clock pass quietly in the background. Third, if you are using an HSA, coordinate early. That does not mean panic. It means know the Medicare and IRS timing rules before you file for Social Security or Medicare. Because once retroactive coverage enters the picture, fixing the HSA side can become much more annoying than people expect. IRS.gov, Medicare.gov. Fourth, keep your paperwork. If your employer coverage is creditable, if your drug coverage is creditable, or if you are using a special enrollment period, those notices and forms matter. When the system asks what coverage you had and when you had it, being organized can save time and trouble. Fifth, use official channels first. Medicare.gov has eligibility and sign-up guidance. Social Security handles much of the enrollment process for Part B, and the IRS governs the HSA tax rules. Those three official sources should be the base layer of your decision-making, not the last place you check. Now, I also want to address something important. A lot of headlines on this topic make it sound like the government is suddenly taking money away from everybody at 65. That is not the right framing. What is really happening is that Medicare has specific enrollment rules, and those rules can become expensive when people miss them. So this is less about surprise policy and more about misunderstanding timing. That distinction matters, because if a headline creates fear without clarity, people either ignore the issue or overreact. Neither one helps. The better approach is simple. Know your enrollment status. Know your coverage type. Know your deadlines. Know whether you have creditable drug coverage. Know whether you need to stop HSA contributions. And if your situation is unusual, confirm it before making the move. That is the mature, accurate way to handle this. Also, one more point for people who are helping parents, relatives, or clients. A lot of the people at risk here are not confused because they are careless. They are confused because the rules are technical, the terminology is not intuitive, and different forms of coverage sound similar even when the Medicare consequences are completely different. Employer coverage, retiree coverage, and COBRA may all sound like job-related insurance. But for Medicare timing, those categories do not always function the same way. That is why this matters so much. Now let's bring this home. If you are turning 65 soon, the key confirmed facts are these. Most people get a 7-month initial enrollment period around age 65. Medicare.gov. Late enrollment penalties for Part B and Part D are generally added to monthly premiums and can last a long time. Medicare.gov. If you have qualifying employer coverage from active work, you may be able to delay Part B without penalty and use a special enrollment period later. SSA.gov. Medicare.gov COBRA does not extend that Part B special enrollment period. Medicare.gov. And once Medicare enrollment starts, HSA contribution rules change, including for retroactive coverage periods. IRS.gov. So what should viewers take from this? Simple. Turning 65 is not just a birthday milestone. It is a timing milestone. If you handle it correctly, you may avoid penalties, tax issues, and coverage gaps. If you handle it casually, those mistakes can become expensive and hard to undo. That is the real fix, not a hack, not a loophole, just getting the timing right before the mistake becomes permanent. If this video helped make the Medicare rules easier to understand, subscribe to Federal Benefits Guide for more clear, fact-based updates. And if you know someone turning 65 this year, send this to them now, because this is exactly the kind of issue people usually hear about after it costs them money. I'm Norix Hale. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next one. This video is for general educational information only and is based on official government guidance. It is not personal legal, tax, or benefits advice. Individual situations can differ.